Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Segal number SE19316 double cylinder surface mounted deadbolt, brushed brass finish, angle strike only, box packaging. Let's go over all of that. First of all, here's the business end of this deadbolt. This deadbolt is a double cylinder, meaning it will have a key on the inside, this of course being the inside, and a key on the exterior, and I'll show you that in a moment. This is their classic sort of decades-old design that people have come to rely on, to expect. A lot of homeowners, when they want something that will provide them the greatest amount of reasonable security, they go for these because of the fact that they are an incredibly secure method of holding the door in the locked position, and they're jimmy-proof, meaning that they're not something that can be tampered with in order to get open. So this is the lock body itself. So first of all, I'm going to take a tour through all the parts that you get in the box, and then part two will be just the installation aspect, going through the instructions step by step. So the components, there's your lock body. Let's get the tape measure and check that. Overall height of the body, 2 7/8. Overall width of that body, kind of eyeball it there, at about 4.5. Okay, and let's do the depth projection off the face of the door. The body itself is about 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/16. Overall, you're about 1 3/4 inch, 13/16. Okay, this is again a double cylinder. You're going to get 2 original Segal keys. That bow is the original Segal type. Okay, there are those bolts locking up and down. 2 keys again, and they can cut more for you should you need them, so that's not a problem at all. Okay. Just showing that to you again so we can go over it. It's non-handed. This lock can be installed in either direction, by the way. So again, 2 keys. You're going to get a cylinder for the exterior. Now you're always going to get a cylinder for the outside. When it's a single cylinder, the body would have a thumb turn. Okay, you would want a double cylinder should you have side lights on a door or some way that someone might be able to get inside and simply unlock the lock. You could also have, and there's 2, schools of thought on this. You could also have little kids in the house, and you simply need to make sure they can't get that door open and take a walk to the park kind of situation, thinking that, oh, my parents know I just left. The other school of thought being, it's dangerous to have a key on the inside, but the key is there for many purposes, and keeping unauthorized entrance is obviously the primary purpose. That cylinder on the outside, this is called a rim cylinder, a very typical classic sort of design. And by the way, this is only available in a Segal keyway. Segal at this time does not offer anything other than a Segal keyway in their double cylinder deadbolts. Now, let's dissect that. If you got a body here, you're only going to get a Segal keyway on the inside. The exterior rim cylinder, you could certainly substitute that out for any keyway that you wanted. Any of the major manufacturers, you could do that. Let's say you had a home that was a keyway other than Segal, you could most likely purchase additionally a different rim cylinder, and then key it to the rest of the house. But if you do a double cylinder, that one's going to be Segal. So that's what you're contending with. This is the brushed brass finish. This is a solid bronze construction on the body and what they call a brushed brass finish. It's not going to be true satin brass because that material is bronze, so it's going to, they should just call it satin bronze, but they're really referring to the tone that's in here of the color. So that rim cylinder is a classic design rim cylinder with a tailpiece. We'll talk more about that when we get to the installation. Well, actually, let's finish off talking about it. With the rim cylinder, you're going to get a cylinder collar, and that's just typical. You're going to usually see that installed in that way. You're going to get a couple of breakaway screws, and I mean breakaway, which we'll talk more about in the installation part of this, where you can accommodate a variety of door thicknesses. So those two screws will go through the mounting plate, and that mounting plate is what's going to hold it on through the door. Okay. Now, the other important part of the parts to know is that this lock, the SE19316, only includes the angle strike. Okay. This is the one that you're going to mortise to the edge of the frame, to the rabbet of the frame, and to the face of the frame, most likely. About 2 and 3 inch overall height is what they're going to call that. Width on the long leg, about 1 inch and 5/16, inch and 3/8. Width on the short leg, about 1 inch and 1/16. Projection of the strike receivers for the bolts, about 7/8. Again, in a complementary finish. A lot of screw holes in there for holding this strike in. Then there's going to be the ancillary parts. Screw packages, you're going to get a mounting or backing plate, which we'll talk more about in a moment. And that's everything. And just some screws, more screws is what I'm trying to say. Segal is a comprehensive provider of this classic deadbolt. The name Segal is synonymous, in my experience, with this sort of surface-mounted chimney-proof type of deadbolt. Now, they also make one that is a slam lock that has a very similar principle, except that the strike is shaped into a spearhead or an arrowhead, so that you could literally take the door and slam it shut. And the bolts are always projected, but they just move in and out to accommodate around the strike. So those are convenient because when you leave, let's say it's the front door of your apartment, you want to just leave and pull the door behind you, and knowing that it's locked. That slam type will do that. Whereas with this double cylinder or single cylinder manual model, you must of course rekey that to lock it and unlock it every time you go in or come out, sort of situation. Now, there is, to finish off the tour of the item, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's catalog page in our site. You can then link to the product catalog. It's a short document, but what it will do is give you the code to all of the other part numbers depending on how your specific needs might change. Another part of this SE19316 is that it comes in a box. The packaging is literally a box. So keep that in mind. You can get it in what they call a clamshell package as well, which is just clear packaging, which you would see in a retail situation. Speaking of that, there is a link below this video to another video, a manufacturer's made video, Segal's video, installation, and they go over the steps of it, and it's a really great video for that purpose. In that video, you will see the lock start out as a clamshell packaged lock. Finally, there is a link below this video to the installation instructions. So if you are just looking at the product in general, review that document. Feel free to reach out to us should you have any specific questions. Otherwise, this part of the video is now going to begin with a comprehensive review of the installation instructions. So when you look at the installation instructions, what you're going to get is 4 pages that have been scanned in, and this video is such that we are going to go from step 1. Step 1 is on page 2. The actual first page is a summary of items necessary, but let's actually start with that. Tools that you're going to need: a center punch, a hammer, an 1 3/8" hole saw, obviously an electric drill, an 1/8 of an inch drill bit, a slotted screwdriver, pliers and a hacksaw. Those will be required, most likely. Straight edge and level, masking tape. So let's go over all that. Step 1 is on page 2. And by the way, this document is certainly included with your package. It will be stapled just like this together. So step 1 is to apply the template to the door based on the hand of the door. Now the template, it's here. It's a full-size template that you're actually going to apply to the door with your masking tape, which is item 9. The template we can look at, for me, is on page 3, at the bottom of page 3. It's very simply indicated, okay, where you apply this based on the hand of the door. You'll simply take the template, and fold it over based on whatever hand of door you're doing. Okay, that template is going to be placed at the proper vertical height, whatever that is for your application. You might want to accommodate, an appropriate height for all people who would use it. You probably would want to have it at least 6 inches above an existing lock. I've got clients who install it way up high and clients who install more of them way down low. I've had people who I've sold these to that are going to use them for a safe room, for a shelter, sort of a extreme temperature shelter, and quite frankly, they're going to space those out. They want to be able to transfer the holding of the door to the frame, top, middle, and bottom. But in typical instances, 6 inches above is pretty typical. Take an audit of the other locks in your home. You might have a back door, front door, garage door, basement door. Check that out. Be similar, I would say. Meaning, an unusual height calls attention to it. Quite frankly, in my opinion, attention that you may not want to call to the security on your door. So you're going to attach the template based on the hand that you're doing. So and you're going to put it on the inside of the door, okay, on the pull side, assuming your door swings in. We're going to assume it swings in. If your door swings out, stop and call. You're going to need a different lock. Not necessarily a different lock, but you'll need a different strike plate. You'll need the flat strike for that application, and then your templating needs to be based on, what you're doing there. So reach out to us and we can discuss that differently. Take care to position the template properly, aligned to the edge of the door, not the frame, and use a straight edge and level to ensure it is placed perfectly level on the door. Use care when taping the template to the door to ensure that the tape doesn't damage the finish on the door. Here's why they're admonishing us to get this template straight and level, vertical. Once this rim cylinder is installed, and there's no need to be overly concerned about getting it correct, but this tailpiece, when the cylinder is operated, drilling and locating of the holes that you're about to drill, smooth operation is dependent on this tailpiece being exactly laser straight. If this is off, the lock is not going to operate properly. Okay, so that's why they're admonishing us to get it straight. Moving on to step 2. This is important. Place the point of the center punch directly on the center of the 4 small mounting holes and the large cylinder hole marked on the installation template, and strike with a hammer to transfer the marks onto the surface of the door and the door trim. So you've got 5 holes on that template. You've got the 4 holes that are going to be the mounting holes. Then you've got the center line of where that rim cylinder is going to be installed through. That's 5 points. Mark them with your center punch. Tap all 5 of those holes. The crucial part of doing that is, when you're pre-drilling your holes, the drill bit has a tendency to walk a little bit if you've not used a center punch. And even the amount of that drill bit walking a little bit before it pierces into the wood, steel, aluminum, fiberglass could be enough, times 5, to make the lock not fit really nice. Okay, so center punch. Step 3, drill the 1 3/8" diameter hole through the door. Take care to ensure that the drill is level and the hole is straight through the door. Tip, bore the hole to the point of the tip, breaking through the opposite side, and then finish boring out the hole from the opposite side to reduce splintering of the door. I drilled circular holes with hole saws countless times. What they're saying is, get that hole saw on the drill and go straight. Be as straight as you possibly can. As soon as the hole saw will hit the face of the door, you'll see, just by the marks that it leaves, how flat you are to getting it straight on. You need to drill that hole straight. Your hole saw has an arbor drill in it. Once that 3/16 or 1/8 of an inch pilot bit breaches the other side, stop. Okay. Remove the drill carefully. Remove any core that's inside of the drill. Dig that out. Go to the other side and complete your hole, drilling it really straight. Okay. And then that 1.3" diameter hole for the rim cylinder that will be on the outside that will communicate to the back side of the lock will be complete. It's that easy. Just straight. Don't be concerned. It's marginally tolerant of a hole that's not exactly straight, but the straighter, the more perfect your installation will be. Step 4. Carefully drill the 4 smaller mounting holes, 1/8 inch drill bit, in the inside of the door, about 3/4 deep. Don't go any deeper than that. Use care to limit the depth of the hole to 3/4 to avoid drilling completely through the door. You don't want to do that because the screws that come with for this don't go through the door. Okay. Now that takes us to step 5, which is on page 3. Step 5 now requires us to refer back to step 1. Step 5, ensure the thickness of the door and measure the thickness of the door and pliers. Measure the thickness of the door. Using pliers, break off the 2 connecting screws and the tailpiece on back of the cylinder to the appropriate length. Now what they mean is the tailpiece, we've got those graduation marks, and then the 2 breakaway screws have to, at this time, be cut to the proper length. That's the pliers and hacksaw they were referring to. Sliding back up to the middle of page 1, let's just, because it's most common, 1.3" door, you're going to take your tailpiece, okay, and break it off at the B point, which is going to be the middle graduation, that middle line there. You're going to snap it off right here. You can't snap it. You want to hold that carefully, and if you can put it in a vise, that's even better, and then carefully cut it with your hacksaw. Take your time with that. Your screws, you're going to break them off at the Y, and the Y is going to be right here, the outer graduation. This will accommodate up to a 2 3/8 thick door. You wouldn't cut your screws down at all. And we'll go down to a 1" door. So you'll use your chart to determine that. X and Y, A and B and C. Those are the break points on all of those. Okay, now we've got those pieces cut. Step 6, slip the cylinder collar over the cylinder body and insert that whole thing through the exterior of the door. Position the keyhole in the bottom of the lock with the Segal trademark at the top. It needs to look like that, is what they're saying. You want the teeth to be pointed towards the top. That's required on this because where that tailpiece is in the back of the cylinder is not symmetrical if you installed it upside down. It needs to be like that. You certainly would have seen locks installed upside down where cuts on the key go down. This lock is not tolerant of that whatsoever. So shoot that in, all the way in. Then you're going to come with your backing plate. Now the backing plate is going to be positioned on the inside of the door. Okay, and you'll have an easy time really of it because this hole here and this hole here made up to the 2 holes that are in the back of the cylinder. And then you'll use your breakaway screws for your installation. So position the steel back plate on the inside of the door, insert the 2 connecting screws into the holes adjacent to the large hole in the center of the back plate, and thread them into the holes in the back of the cylinder. Using a screwdriver, tighten the screws, making sure that the back plate is positioned 1/8 inch from the edge of the door and the 4 small mounting holes are accessible. Okay? In this sort of installation, you will not be using the retaining plate, okay, at all. The reason that this is included is because this is an incredibly standard item to include. It is a standard item to include with a rim cylinder. Just like you would have 2 screws and 2 keys, This plate's as important as all of those things to be included. You won't use it in your installation. You'll simply discard it. Moving on to step 8 now. With the deadbolt in the unlocked position, push and hold in the shutter guard in place. Push and hold in the shutter guard and place the lock case over the back plate on the inside of the door. Make sure the tailpiece goes into the hole at the back of the lock. When you expose the shutter guard, the tailpiece of your cylinder is going to shoot right inside of there. Okay, that's how that's going to be. It's important that that's done that way. Now we are moving on to page 4, step 9. Holding the lock in place, operate the lock from the inside and outside to ensure smooth operation. So what they're saying is, you've got the cylinder installed on the outside. It's on the door now. You're going to place the lock body over that, push it on, and hold it now. Just hold it on the door. Test your operation. Key on the inside. Make sure it works really smooth, that these fingers fire very smoothly up and down. You want it to be very free and smooth. If it's not, you're going to be in a position where you might have to re-drill a hole a little bit, cut the tailpiece a little bit shorter, watch out for the screws. You know, the tailpiece, really, the screws are good at this point. If you cannot get it to work smoothly, this could still be too long. So double check your work there. If it's cut properly, it will work fine. If binding occurs, recheck the thickness of the door, the length of the tailpiece, how straight your installation is. Retrim the tailpiece if necessary. Step 10, using the 4 2-inch mounting screws and a screwdriver, which you've already pre-drilled the holes, attach the deadbolt to the inside of the door through here. Check your installation again, make sure it's smooth. Step 11, set the lock strike in place now. Get the lock in the locked position. However, you're going to first need to, if the angle strike is being used, it must be mortised into the jamb. You're going to need to eyeball this where it has to go. Okay, something like just like this. That's what you're dealing with. There's no realistic way to install that upside down. It's going to go either like this or like this. You're going to mark off where you're going to start to chisel. And you're going to need to mortise the face of the frame and then the rabbet of the frame for the long leg. Okay, that material thickness is, looks like it's just heavy on 1/8 of an inch, or right thereabouts, or maybe a little bit thinner. Angle strike being used, mortise it to the jamb. Align the strike on the door jamb with the lock strike centered on the bolt. So we just discussed that. Make sure there is no interference between the bolt and the strike when operating the lock. Mark the position of the strike and then unlock the door and open it. Mark the center of the mounting holes on the strike and drill 1/8 of an inch holes where marked. It may be necessary to shim the door frame or mortise out the frame for proper strike alignment. You're going to need to get the strike mortised is the bottom line. You are very much so going to want to pre-drill all 6 of these holes for your screws. Very important. You do not want to split the frame by running those screws in. You're going to want to make sure that you're pre-drilling all the way in, especially for these long screws, back to what it's going into. You don't want to get 1.5 inches in and then you can't continue to get it screwed in. You're going to want to take care not to strip these screws out at that point. Those screw heads are something you're always going to see. So proper pre-drilling, which is 1/8 of an inch, is crucial. Step 12, place the strike over the holes on the frame. Operate the lock again to ensure that the bolt and strike are in alignment. Attach the strike to the frame using the supplied 3/4 inch screws and a screwdriver. Now, the concept here is you're going to have some short screws, as you can see, and then some long screws. The concept is that the short screws go in the face, and the concept is that especially these 2 screws are going to hit the studs behind the frame. That's the idea. I would not be using the long screws over here. I would only be using them back here. That would be the way I would do it. Okay. Some people, if doing a new installation, they will even get more exotic than long screws and line the back side of the jamb with steel. etc. It's generally the frame that's going to break in this sort of, in a kick-in, vandalism break-in sort of situation. In a door that swings in, the lock body's not going to get ripped off the door because you're pushing against the lock body. It's those screws that you're going to want to make sure you get adequately secured. The truth of the matter is, if somebody's going to get in, there's not much that can actually be done if excessive force is used. But some people, even if you lined the back of the jamb, assuming this is new installation or some retrofit that you're doing, even if you line the back of that with some sheet metal, it will give a significant amount of, rigidity to the frame, like an I-beam. This vertical part's called the web. When you take it this way and then try to do a kick-in against that much steel, even though it's quite thin, it becomes incredibly, significantly more secure. It just does. So a lot of people do that. It's a very typical sort of situation. That brings us to the end of the installation aspect. Now, I've installed these countless times, and really the truth of the matter is, drill the hole straight, that hole for the cylinder. That's not a major big deal. That 1 3/8 is actually a little bit bigger than necessary for this, which is why that cylinder collar is ever so slightly greater diameter than a typical one. So there's a little bit of tolerance there. The most important thing is that before you leave, if you are an installer or you're installing it for somebody, make sure absolutely that you can, from both sides of the door, unlock the lock and lock the lock and remove the key. Unlock the lock, okay, and remove the key is crucial. And that you can do the same on the outside. The reasoning is this: you want to be absolutely sure that the timing of the cam that's inside of here is correct. You can literally install it so that all you can do is unlock it and remove the key, but you can never fully lock it and then remove the key without unlocking it again. The first time I made that mistake, I got about an hour away from the job site before the client called and said, "Hey, I can't leave and leave my door locked. It's always unlocking." Right then and there, I knew I had forgotten to test that operation. I was in a hurry, obviously, and have not made that mistake since. So I'd admonish you to double check that before you leave, or try to leave, I suppose. Segal, I'm partial to the brand because, a bunch of reasons. First of all, they're tried and true. They've been around for decades and decades, and they last for decades and decades. I've installed this in applications where clients, a steel door and steel frame for an outswing, and a lot of that's going to be eyeballed. You wouldn't use the angle strike for an outswing. You'd use the flat strike, get the strike applied to the frame first, and then margin the lock body off of that, because the template doesn't come specifically made for that sort of installation, but it certainly can be done. That axis of where those holes are is not, exactly vertically correct in the face of this, so you can, use that on an outswinging door. I've installed it where I've gone with through bolts, especially in an outswing sort of application on the lock body. You don't want someone to be able to get a crowbar and just crank the door open and wreck the body off the door. And if you're using sheet metal screws like these in an 18-gauge steel door, something's going to give. Things of that nature. I'm also partial to Segal because of their excellent customer service. There's a particular gentleman there who is incredibly responsive to constant questions. Their customer service department is very fluid, very predictable. And it's a name that people trust, so it's an easy lock to sell because of the high quality of it. If you have any questions on the Segal SE19316 surface-mounted double-cylinder deadbolt or any other Segal product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.